Hello and welcome to another monthly installment of Lean Catalyst, Strategies and Tactics for the Transformational CEO. I'm your host, Damon Baker, and I'm the CEO of Lean Focus. In this dynamic monthly one-hour interview series, we bring together like-minded CEOs and leaders who've successfully transformed their organizations through lean thinking to drive exceptional results. It's through our captivating conversations that we'll delve into their remarkable achievements, uncovering the strategies and insights and practical wisdom that have propelled themselves and their organizations forward. Each series features an in-depth interview with the distinguished CEO who has demonstrated extraordinary leadership leveraging lean principles, and it's a great opportunity for them to share their experience with us, strategies, valuable knowledge that others can apply their own leadership journeys. Today, it's my distinct honor to present you to today's guest, John McKnight. Good morning, John. How are you? John has joined Dorman Products in 2019 as a Senior Vice President of Global Operations and was later promoted to President of the Heavy Duty Aftermarket Dayton Parts business. Prior to Dorman Products, John was the Chief Operating Officer of Morgan Corporation, which is a producer of truck and van bodies in North America. I believe it's the largest producer of truck and van bodies in North America. Prior to Morgan, John held positions of increasing responsibility throughout his career, including Divisional President roles at Colfax Corporation, which is a baby spin out of Danaher, as well as President and Vice President General Manager roles at Danaher Corporation. John also has experience in many various industries, including Petrochem, oil and gas, metals and minerals, aerospace and defense, material handling, industrial and automotive, and of course, heavy duty trucks. On the education side, John's got a Bachelor in Science from Industrial Engineering from Virginia Tech, go Hokies, and a Master of Engineering in Management and an MBA from Northwestern University, Kellogg School of Management, go Wildcats. Which one do you have more allegiance to, John?
To your undergrad, unless your undergrad does not have a good football or basketball team. So Virginia Tech has my allegiance. Yeah.
All right, you heard it. So John, for those that don't know what Dayton Parts does or what your company is about, can you give us an explanation of what Dayton Parts is, markets they serve, types of customers and products?
Sure, absolutely. So Dayton Products is a operating company of Dorman. Dorman Products acquired Dayton a little over three and a half years ago. Dorman's heritage is light duty aftermarket. So, if you have a part on your car that's broken, and if you're a DIY person, you go to Advance Auto, AutoZone, Napa, O'Reilly, and now Amazon or Rock Auto. Or if you're a DIFM person, your technician, would be looking for our parts. Again, these are parts in the aftermarket. Your car is out of warranty. The OEM's not supporting it anymore. And so you need somewhere to get the parts to keep your car running down the road. Similarly, Dayton Parts is in the heavy duty aftermarket. So instead of light duty cars and trucks, we're serving heavy duty vehicles like Mack Volvo, Freightliner, Peterbilt. These are large tractor trailers and tractors and the trailers. But additionally, we sell or service fire trucks, cement trucks, garbage trucks, school buses. We primarily do that through one of 4 channels, a spring shop channel. So this is traditionally undercarriage, just suspension work, up to parts distributors or warehouse distributors, into national accounts. These would be guys like Truck Pro or Fleet Pride, and then certainly the OE dealers themselves. We sell to those groups who need support for their customers who come to them in the aftermarket. So those are our 4 primary channels. Innovation is our core, building out our portfolio, having parts in the aftermarket that other folks don't have, and providing those at a high quality, in a high quality state at a price that meets customers' needs.
Just out of curiosity, how does the design control aspect work? Like if you're making parts for Ford vehicle, as an example.
Sure. Well, there's typically not a lot of intellectual property in many of the products that are on the vehicle. And you have to remember, these are heavy duty vehicles. The heavy duty industry is probably 10 to 15 years behind the light duty industry in terms of all the electronics, the ADAS, the collision avoidance, things like that, the self-driving. So, and that's where a lot of the IP is today. So, and we're designing parts, springs, leaf springs. Leaf springs have been around for 120 years. Not a lot of IP there. New truck comes out, we find out about it. We go ahead and we design our own part. We put it in our catalog. We may not be producing it for 5 years or 8 years, but at some point that vehicle will need aftermarket parts, and we're there. And that goes from spring parts and suspension all the way up to, upper in the cab and body, window regulators, wiper motors, door handles, you name it. We try to provide everything that truck may need during its life, which could involve up to 4 or 5 owners to its life.
Got it. So for those that don't know you, John, can you briefly introduce yourself and give maybe an interesting fun fact or tidbit about your background that maybe people don't know?
Sure. Well, you did a great job of introducing, work and education. I would say a nod to the Hokies. Huge college football fan. 9 in the morning, I'm on East Coast. 9 in the morning, college game day comes on. The TV doesn't, go off until usually 11 o'clock at night. We're trying to catch those West Coast games and everything in the middle. Car enthusiast, classic cars. I own a Chevelle, a 1970 Chevelle. I did not restore it. I just wrote a check, but I enjoy it quite a bit. But I do enjoy actually turning a wrench and working on my own vehicles. Most recently, I replaced the front strut assemblies on my Tahoe, and really, when I have time, I enjoy doing that.
Yeah, I didn't know you were a car guy. Is that partly what attracted you to Dayton Parts as well?
Well, interestingly, the now CEO, fellow that I met, probably about 10 years ago, and we followed each other to Colfax and stayed in touch. He came up here, and I would always send him pictures over the weekend. Hey, I'm, putting this Dorman product on my car. I'm putting that Dorman product on my car. I like to drive cars till the wheels fall off. I'm a manufacturing guy. I'm cheap. If it runs, keep using it. You don't need to, buy new equipment if it works. And I'd send him pictures. So at some point, I was up here in Pennsylvania working for Morgan, and he said, I don't know why you don't come work for Dorman. You love our products. You use them all the time. And he continued to work on me until after about a year, he convinced me, and I've been here now for 5 years, November.
And are you spending more money than you'd like to on parts for your vehicles? Or do you
No, not at all, not at all. And in fact, in some cases, like these front strut assemblies on the light duty side, this is a new product for Dorman. And as a contributor here, they provided me product for free. All they wanted was for me to try them on and give them feedback as in the installation and whether it affected ride height or vehicle driving, things like that. And so it actually saves me money working at Dorman now.
Perfect, love it. So I talk a lot sometimes about your lean moment, that point in your career where it just sort of clicked for you. Maybe it's like your first Kaizen event experience or your first real immersion in lean principles where it all started to make sense, or maybe it was like this catalyzing moment where from that point forward you didn't look back and you made this how you were going to lead and run businesses or take part in how the business runs. So for you, walk us through the lean story, when you were first introduced to this, and give us the milestones along the way.
Well, I'm gonna go back. We didn't touch on it in in the introduction, but I actually in the 90s, before going back to grad school, I worked for a Japanese tier 1 for 8 years. I started in the factory, manufacturing supervision, department management, quality engineering, and then moved into commercial roles, primarily account management, primarily at Toyota for the 4 years that I was out on the street. And I was surprised after spending all the time that I did at Toyota. I was just surprised at the fact that we, a tier 1, did not lean into anything that Toyota was doing. I don't know if that was an artifact of being, in the U.S. led by U.S. Folks, or if the organization had determined that all the lean work would be done in Japan, and then we would just, get the product of what they did. But to me, as a associate of that company for many years, it just surprised me that we didn't lean into that, and that ultimately led, among other reasons, for me to go back and get my MBA with a focus in manufacturing. I wanted to get better equipped, learn new skills, and then come back out into the manufacturing world. I was fortunate enough to have been hired by Danaher at the time, and even more fortunate that the operating company that I joined, Morgan, was recently acquired by Danaher, and they were beginning their lean journey. And I was brought in as a member of senior staff, a junior member of senior staff, but always in the room with the senior staff from day one. And it was a journey from the day I started to the day I left of how to build a lean enterprise. This leadership team was learning it along the way. I was learning right beside them, and the team bought into it. Every aspect of it bought into it, and ultimately, I bought into it, and it became part of who how I lead and who I am. And so I just think it was fate or fortune that brought me there, and I'm certainly glad that happened, because it's been something that I've carried forward with me since then.
Aware of the Toyota production system back then in that first role? Like, was there books that you had gotten your hands on, or anything documented? Like, what sort of years are we talking about here? Is this late 90s, early 90s?
Well, yeah, so 91 to 99 in the tier 1 role, and then 2001 till effectively 2011 or 12, I can't recall right now, but with Danaher, and learning from the ground floor. And it was all the things that everybody early in their careers in lean read. The learning to see, right, is the big primary one. And I still leverage that approach today with my folks when we're talking about an issue. Let's all go down to Gemba and let's stand there for 15 minutes and observe and see what's not working well. And so that introduction, and of course all the other materials. In the early 2000s, the Danaher business system was primarily operational focused. I think all of us that came out of Danaher recall those days. It pivoted over the years to be an enterprise-wide, business system delivering great results. But those early days really, for me, reinforced the need to have that foundation, those foundational tools that allow people to you build a foundation, you build that core knowledge. They are able to see successes by transforming a process flow or a transactional flow, solving using problem solving and effective problem solving to get to the root cause. They are able to do that, and then once you have that foundation, of course, you're delivering the results, but then you can build sophistication on top of it. So again, that term lean journey really resonates with me, because you don't run before you walk. And so walking to me are the foundational tools. And so that's where I like to start, when I'm in a new organization, making sure we have good foundational tools that are helping us deliver results. And then we add a little sophistication to the playbook.
When you got to Dorman, I imagine, Dorman had a culture in place. Every business has a culture, whether they know it or not, and they're being deliberate about it or not. And oftentimes the behaviors or the ways that people interact with one another in their day-to-day work and how they lead the business stands in the way of doing a lot of the things that you're describing culturally, so to speak. So it's really behaviors, or maybe poor behaviors, or the lack of the right behaviors that you'd like to see in a quote unquote lean organization. So take me back to that time when you said, hey, yeah, I'll lead the Dayton Parts business, and now you've got to get your arms around the culture, the tone and tenor inside the organization, and make an assessment as to what you have, what needs to change, behaviors that you want to focus on, kind of like how much of a flip was it to use housing terms, or was it just build on what you already have there?
Well, let me touch briefly on the Dorman piece, because that is important in the journey. Dorman, very well run company, great success in the market.
It's a Dayton Parts, right?
We are, yeah, Dorman is the parent. We are an operating company. Dorman was for 120 years that was it. And then over the last 5 years, we've added the heavy duty division and a specialty vehicles division. So now it's light duty, heavy duty, and specialty, if you will, and that's how we report to the street. But in that culture was somewhat of a silo mentality. The thought of building a business system that crossed over the functions. I tried early on, and it was not received at all by anyone in the organization. And even the CEO, let me know that, hey, yeah, ultimately we need to get there, but we've got a few foundational pieces that we need to put in place first. So what I did is I just focused on my own team. I had distribution, all of our logistics, about 3 million square feet of distribution, all of our supply chain, all of our logistics, customer experience. And so the thing I kept telling my team is we can't tell people what to do, but we can influence how they act by showing them how we can deliver results and how they can participate in delivering those results. So bring people along with you versus forcing them to change. And that's ultimately what we did. When I came over here, it was an entirely different environment. This was a company that, again, 120 years old or so, private equity held for years, a very senior staff, a very small senior staff with a lot of tribal knowledge. In fact, the person in my chair before me that I succeeded had been here 40 years. More tribal knowledge in the spring industry than I'll ever have. When that knowledge walked out the door through retirement, we lost all that. Our ERP was customized to do exactly what it needed to do. So I recognized early on, got to upgrade talent, got to upgrade systems, got to get a playbook in place, a foundational playbook. And so that's what we've been leaning on the last 2 years. Certainly the market that we operate in hasn't helped. It's made it challenging to make investments, but we've done it. And so we're coming out the other side of it, new system, upgraded talent team, driving improvements, starting again, using my old Danaher experience. We're starting in the factories and in the distribution centers to put in the foundational tools to deliver results, standard work, root cause and countermeasure, mapping our value streams. We're going to introduce variation reduction, and we're going to keep building on those tools, and then ultimately bringing those into the transactional side of the world, whether it be finance and cash collection or the commercial team and sales force effectiveness. So in football terms, again, I'm a football fan. We're in the first quarter, but we have a long game ahead of us, and we've got a playbook, and so we're going to execute that playbook. Barring any changes in the external environment, then we'll change our playbook. But I feel confident that we're going to get there, and along the way, we're going to create some outstanding leaders who are really ingrained in the lean philosophy.
What percent of the leadership team from that when you first took the role is intact now, kind of at multiple levels you estimate?
I would say of the nine folks, we only have one left of the original team, and I'm including myself in that number, by the way.
And was the majority of the folks that left on their own, or you couldn't get them to fit into the culture that you were trying to build inside of Dayton?
Well, it's an interesting piece. I would say 4 of those were part of the folks that had equity ownership during the transaction and were retained during the transaction. So I was working against a little bit of that. So I let, of course, we honored that and let them write out that obligation so that they could earn their earn out. The others left on their own. They saw that, the changes that we were making. There were a couple of retirements, I should have said, but left on their own. And in the end, and it wasn't a dramatic, a difficult thing to do. It probably could have happened faster, but in the situation I found myself in, I let it, the timeline run its course. But now that we have those new leaders, the results are really starting to pile on. I'll give you a quick example. We have a new manufacturing leader. We have two manufacturing plants, one here in Pennsylvania, one in Oklahoma. And we have brought in the foundational tools of lean, implemented real daily management with gimbal walks, value stream mapping of the key value streams, 5S activity. These are, they feel like 100-year-old. We're a 100-year-old business. The plants feel like they're 100 years old. The driving changes in those locations, employee engagement, retention numbers, way better. Employee engagement way better. We're starting to see productivity improvements that the business hasn't seen for 5 years. So we're starting to build that momentum, and in the distribution center as well, bringing in the productivity tools, the transactional process improvement tools to improve the delivery product to customer at a lower overall cost to serve. We're making those improvements. A lot of work left, but we're making the improvements, and the rest of the organization is seeing that. We wouldn't be doing that if we didn't have these new leaders. I tried on my own, and it was impossible on my own. With the team now, we're all bought in, we're making the improvements, and again, we've got a lot of runway. And so I'm excited to see what the team can deliver this year and certainly through the next several years.
I picked up on something you said in your story when you were still maybe at the parent company side of Dorman, kind of corporate, when you were talking about how you tried to make an attempt to run up the hill to get this company-wide and kind of cross-functional, and the CEO at the time said, hey, we're not ready for that, which is a pretty common reaction, and it's one that I encounter quite often. But
Sure.
the response person trying to make the run up the hill is to then say, well, I tried, I give up, and they'll either ride it out, but in the meantime, they're sort of like searching for their next opportunity. And I tell people all the time, like, look, focus on what you can control. And if you want this to the organization, like, make a difference in the part of the business that you have responsibility for. And that's exactly what you did. Like, you said, look, I've got a pretty significant part of the business, a big significant part of the cost structure of this business. And we're going to prove that this stuff works. And do you feel like that decision led ultimately to like why you are in the role that you're in right now?
Well, maybe, maybe not. Most likely, in full disclosure, I was the only guy on the team, the Dorman team, that actually run a P&L. And so it made sense for me to move over here to help. The CEO asked me to come over here and do this. But I would say that the successes we had through a very difficult time, I failed to mention, when I joined Dorman, 4 months later, COVID, the world shut down. I mean, I was literally sitting in our distribution center, 1 million square feet in Tennessee, trying to figure out how to improve our productivity by, dramatically. And the answer was unfortunately, we needed to reduce our staff quite substantially. At the time, we had about 800 people, and we needed to, move 300 people out the door. March 12th happened. I believe it was March 12th, the world shut down, and half the people quit coming to work. So, productivity problem solved practically. But then the next challenge was, when the stimulus spending and boom happened, I needed like 900 people, and we couldn't get people. So it was a challenging time. But I knew that when I came in, the CEO and I had talked about building a business system. Start small, but just the foundational tools. I think he and I are like-minded. But when it didn't go forward, I'm not going to say couldn't. When it didn't go forward, the only thing left to do was, back to your point, focus on what you can control. And I knew that we could make improvements, in our part of the business, and they would ripple through. I mean, if I could make improvements in productivity in the distribution centers, it was going to help us to have be able to strategically price. If I was able to, working with logistics, get much better at visibility to when we were going to be able to move product into our distribution center and then out the door with our distribution team, that could help us improve our fill rates. In the light duty industry, you get fined when you don't, have the product that they want to order, and you don't, ship it on time. So that could bring, better customer satisfaction, reduce fines, so better profitability. So no matter where you looked, there were opportunities. And so instead of, using that analogy, I'm going to take my toys from the sandbox and go home. The only thing left to do was we'll lean in, control what you can control, encourage the team. Let's not fix the world's problems. Let's fix our problems. The world will benefit. And so that's what we did. And that ultimately, back to your original question, probably didn't hurt when he asked me to come over and run this business, knowing that there was going to, need to be a transformation over here as well.
Yeah. I'll talk about safety for a second. So Alcoa, I can't remember the CEO's name, but very famous for leading a transformation through a transformation of safety culture. And his belief was that, if you protect the employees, regardless of where they work, and if you respect them and you make a safe workplace and you involve them in improving their workplace, it's going to read through in so many other areas, especially culturally, and just how problems are exposed and how problems are dealt with and how leaders and associates interact with one another. So I remember quite vividly, like when you took on the Dayton Parts role, that you had a pretty dire safety situation on your hands culturally, and we had it, I would say, sometimes beat into our heads at Danaher, like don't succumb to what we call SQDIC dyslexia, where you get the letters of daily management out of order in terms of your priority. Like, don't focus on cost at the expense of safety or quality or delivery and so on. And the same applies for quality. Don't focus on cost at the expense of quality, and kind of get it like it's safety first, quality second, and so on. So walk us through what you encountered culturally, talk about sort of the physical state of maybe some of the factories you took on, and then what you did, most importantly, to transform the whole culture around safety, because I don't think it gets a lot of press in terms of lean, where we talk about how important safety is, where that's really the topic, and there's a lot of knowledge and body of knowledge written about it in the lean context. We kind of go straight to the productivity and cost and delivery tools, and we kind of skip the safety. So like, take us through that journey.
And for the audience, I mean, Damon has a little bit of inside baseball knowledge because we collaborated and had one of his resources in to help us out. And just to set the stage, I mentioned it a moment ago, these spring shop plants, you could have walked in 50 years ago, probably not 100 years ago, that was a bit of an exaggeration, but 50 years ago, and it would look exactly the same as it does today. This is not heavy duty springs. Unlike light duty springs, heavily automated. So for your car or your truck, for light trailers, you might buy at Lowe's or Home Depot to move your garbage or what have you. Assembly line, automated, lights out. They're making thousands of the same thing. Ours is a lot different. It's a very high mix. I mean, we make product that was first on the road, 60 years ago, 80 years ago. We still have the original molds for the Mustang when it came out in 65. Tools. We still, the Model T, we can make all that stuff, even though that isn't heavy duty. Back in the day, Dayton did everything. So you walk in the plant, it feels like you walked in 50 years ago. And you're right, Damon. I don't think the previous leadership team was ignored safety, but it certainly wasn't top of mind. And so one of the first things I did coming over, so I'm the president, and I have vice presidents working for me. The safety leader, is a senior manager, not even a director, not a senior director, is a manager. And one of the first things I did is made him a member of my senior staff and joining all of our meetings and operating reviews. Safety is the first thing. Everybody knows this in the audience, but you cover safety first and make sure you're providing a safe environment for your contributors. You want them to come to work, be able to earn a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. You want them to go home safely at the end of the day. If you do those things right, you've had a good day. Not that Dayton had a terrible track record, but when incidents happen, they're fairly severe. You're talking about, leaf springs with leaves that the springs themselves could weigh up to 400 pounds. So, one of those tips over, you're losing fingers. And unfortunately, we've had that happen before. So getting that safety to be top of mind, and then, not just having him on staff, making sure that in my Gemba walks, we were touching on safety, making sure that everything we do, we're leaning heavily into value stream mapping, and we're ultimately going to be relaying out some of our processes. Safety has to be, involved to make sure we're not making changes that would be, worse for the contributor. Ultimately, as you clearly pointed out, the changes that we're making will lead to better productivity and higher quality, but you don't want those at the detriment of a less safe, workspace for the contributors. So, it almost gets to me right now, and again, I keep saying this, it must be for many in the audience, it becomes like breathing or blinking. I mean, you don't think about it because it's table stakes. And if you don't get that right, then at the end of the day, none of it really matters.
Yeah, I say people won't care until you show them that you care. And safety, to me, is one of the ultimate proof points of where you can do that, where like you really care about people's well-being enough to ensure that protected each and every day. And that just reads over into so many different aspects of business and just how you lead and interact with people.
I know we're short on time, but just a brief, another example, and this is, gosh, now over 20 years ago. But one of my early Danaher experiences was opening a plant in low-cost region. And I remember vividly at the time, talking about, and this was from the building to hiring all the staff to, the equipment, and local infrastructure, your compressor, your bus ducts for your electricity, all that stuff. And I remember the local leadership team, saying, why are you buying the Square D bus ducts? We have a knockoff version that's half the cost. And why are you doing this? Why are you putting in this? Why are you requiring safety glasses? And to them, I guess, I don't want to speak poorly of those folks, but to them, safety wasn't important, and life was pretty cheap. But not for me, and certainly not, for Danaher at the time. We were going to make a facility that was followed the exact same protocols that we would follow in the United States, no matter if we were in Timbuktu or Thailand or you name it. And that's what we did. And so that was something that I've carried forward with me. And it's not something I did on my own, but it's certainly something that resonated with me, that you have to put safety first, no matter what. There's no cost to it. We're going to do it right. And we're not local. We want to meet the letter of the law locally, but if that means we're going over, fine, we're going to go over to meet the standards that we want to meet.
I'd like to hear your reaction to this. So since I departed Danaher in 2016 and started this business, I had an idea about how I would engage with clients in sort of a systematic way, following a playbook. One could argue it was standard work. And I learned very quickly that if you've seen one lean transformation, you've literally seen one lean transformation, and that everyone and adjust and be more flexible in our approach with different clients, different industries, different leadership, personality traits and behaviors, and even business priorities. And where maybe we were sort of spoiled sometimes in following the playbook each and every time Danaher would make an acquisition. Outside in the wild, I found it very different, and I fell on my face very early on. And thankfully, we pivoted, and now we tailor everything we do to the client's unique situation and circumstances, without trying to impose upon them, a certain way of doing things that maybe isn't natural or doesn't fit their culture. So I'm curious to hear from you, like, what have you had to unlearn post Danaher? And now that you've gone out and you've done this in a few places since then, given your bio background, we worked together in one of your other businesses as well. And I know that situation intimately, and that one was very different than what you're talking about today and kind of what the priorities were. So what sticks out in your mind is the things John had to unlearn from his days at Danaher in order to be successful today?
Well, I really appreciate you opening the door for this, for this discussion, because for the longest time, well, let me back up. I think for the time after I left Danaher, which was a wonderful experience, very, very challenging. Everybody who went through that time, maybe still is in it, knows that it's a challenging, rewarding place to work. Learn more than I'll ever be able to repay. But when I left, I thought there was one way and one way only, and that was everything all at once, all the time. And I'll tell you, that is practically impossible when you walk into a new organization without having the inertia of a $18 billion company behind you. It's not practically impossible, it's impossible. So what I've had to learn, and you've had to learn, and many others I'm sure have had to learn, is how to be situationally aware, to understand the environment you find yourself in, the culture, the people, the state of the business, where the business needs to evolve and transform, everything all at once, versus, there can be a roadmap, and where do we need to focus first? In many cases, the organization has good talent that hasn't been led. And so, trying to get them to play out, continue with the football terms, trying to get that team to play at, Super Bowl caliber level is not going to happen. So you have to take, and this was a lesson early on from a EVP, Phil Nicely, that was my mentor. You have to win with the team you're given. So taking that methodology in and determining how much they can take and how fast, and in some cases, you might need to, depending on the environment you find yourself in, you might need to push faster because the business requires it. I mean, our roles ultimately are to deliver results. So some cases you may have to move faster, but it's exactly what you said, Damon. It's situational awareness and understanding how far and how fast you need to go and that organization can go, and then you build your playbook around it. And they're all different. It's like, early on, we went down and visited E-Town, a Danaher business, to try to learn Kanban. And we literally said, let's take their Kanban playbook and bring it back to Radford, Virginia, and we're going to get Kanbans. And boy, did we get Kanbans. We had Kanban cards everywhere, on the floor, heading to customers, getting sent to suppliers, but it didn't work because our business was different. So understanding how to adapt, the tools themselves, but also how to adapt your methodology to work for the environment is crucially important.
I think I could probably have a whole nother episode on all the mistakes I made. Another one was not respecting the goodness about the culture that you're inheriting or working with, and appreciating that. In case of Dayton, is a great example. Like, the business has been around for a long, long time. So obviously they must have been successful at something, many things, in order to still be here, given that the average age of the business is 5 years or less. So what was it that you encountered when you joined the company? Like, what were the things that you were surprised most by in terms of the goodness that you maybe didn't expect, culturally or process wise or people wise, that gave you a strong foundation to build upon and try to do some of these other things in a customized way that wouldn't jeopardize all that goodness to actually make it even better?
Well, I mean, being perfectly transparent, Dayton, great company, great history. I mean, our customers in the spring shop channel and the warehouse distributor channel, I mean, these are multi-generational family companies. Where I was in New York last week, I visited, among the many customers, a 36-year-old guy. His parents, in their 70s, they took it over from their parents, and so relationship, huge. The working with the company over years, and that's what I walked into. The CEO, the person that I replaced when he retired, 40 years in the business. Everybody knew his name, a titan in the spring industry. But again, that was the goodness. But again, when he left, all that knowledge walked out with him. So how do you know that you've got seasonal demand for, say, school bus in the summer? So you have to pre-build school bus products so that when the summer comes and all those school buses are getting worked on. So recognizing these things that where we had to lean in and try to build process around, and not have it be people dependent. And that's what we've been doing, not perfectly. I wish we were much further along, but understanding those intersections between knowledge and process and people and building, knowledge into the system, so that as we move forward, and ultimately I'll retire, and ultimately folks will move on, but we're able to provide that customer experience that 36-year-old's grandparents had 60, 70 years ago with Dayton, that he sees that today, and it continues, him coming back to us despite challenges we may have, but his loyalty still stays with Dayton. He still gives us an outside share wallet, and we continue to thrive and grow over the years. So that's the focus. That's what I walked into, and we're still working on it. As we've mentioned, and you've outlined in your interview guideline, it's a transformation. This isn't a one and done. It's continuous. The environment changes, people change, I should say, and you continually look for those things that you need to work on to really build a very, very healthy business, one that has high engagement with contributors, great retention, and ultimately we're developing future leaders for the company.
Yeah, if I were to put a label on everything you just said there, I would describe it as the superpower of Dayton is customer intimacy. And if businesses that maybe serve a commoditized sector, not to say that you guys are commodity in any regards, but there's other options out there, I'm sure, that people could utilize. So if all things were the same, and all the companies offered the same product, but one stood out as being really more in tune with the customer and caring about the customer and forming deep long-term relationships with the customer, and that look more like partnerships, I think it's pretty clear like who's going to win in that market.
Sure. Yeah, and this is the first industry, company and industry I've worked in that everything you said is true. Business to business, most of my career, highly engineered product, and people changing all the time. So it's really who has the best widget at best price, and that usually won the day. But here, the relationships are crucial, and customer intimacy, you're right, is crucial. I was just sitting down with my HR leader, and we have folks that are very good on products, very good on relationships, but they're not the greatest, commercially effective people. So how do we take the goodness, and harkens back to the question or comment you made earlier, how do you take that goodness that they have and add to it? And so that's what we're working on. We're working on how to improve their effectiveness as salespeople. Maybe there are systems or tools that we could leverage, like Salesforce.com or some other CRM. But then how do we also create standard work so that we can make their day more effective? But it is all about that piece you mentioned. There's goodness there. How do we build on it?
So we've got a lot of questions, John. Are you ready to take some questions from the audience?
Sure.
All right, first one. Have you ever incorporated environmental waste, i.e. solid waste, water use, energy use, into your main Kaizen activities?
We have, but I wouldn't say they've been formalized into Kaizens themselves. But as an overall, ESG awareness and push, so we've leaned into that, and so that has driven things like, do we have the most effective lighting solutions? Everybody looks at lighting as a huge opportunity to improve utility costs. Are we contracting and handling our solid waste? We have a lot of metal scrap in the business that I'm in, but we also have a lot of machine oils and lubricants. So are we effective at both procuring those materials, but also when it comes time for recycling and disposal recycling, are we effectively handling that? So not part of a Kaizen push per se, but certainly part of our enterprise-wide efforts to improve our ESG standing, and try to be a better corporate citizen to our local community.
Yeah, this was an area we're helping you with too, on utility rate reduction, and trying to negotiate better rates through
Sure.
the utilities, electricity and gas and things like that for your factories. So it's maybe it's not a Kaizen event, but it's definitely an improvement type of project to
Sure, sure. We have an indirect team now now that we're a multi-opco that's been invested in, and so we're leveraging that team on those very things that you're talking about. But it's indirect side is huge opportunities.
This question here, I like your focus on safety. Lean is all about people, and people respond well when people know that the company cares about them. So that's just a comment, not a question. So hats off to you. Next question, what areas of operations are you looking for opportunities to utilize AI, if you are at all?
Wow, that's a great question.
General, that was
what was that, Damon?
automation in general, that was the follow-up to
Sure. Yeah, so for us, it's a great question. It's very topical because one of the things that we're attempting to do, again, we're in some respects, despite all the goodness I talked about, the deep relationships, the long-standing history, Dayton, through the private equity ownership, probably took a step back in investments in some of the areas that they should have been investing in, and so we're putting the foot to gas, around our digital or e-com experience, and where that AI is going to come into play is in the heavy duty industry. You have folks that sit on the counter at these spring shops or at the warehouse distributors who know every single part ever made. You just tell them 3 letters and they'll tell you, what it is. But those folks are aging out, and you have folks that might be just entering their career in the industry, sitting at the counter. And if you don't provide them an easy way to find the parts digitally, then they won't find it. They'll go to the next guy. So AI is going to help us. We're in the middle of a website revamp, and the number one thing we're striving for is improved searchability, to where customers find what they want fast, and then they put it in their basket and then they order from us. That'll allow us to do some other things as well, but that's the big start for us. I think Dorman overall, being much bigger than us, is leveraging AI in different ways, but for Dayton, that's going to be the most impactful way that we can use it right now.
A lot to learn in that space from Amazon. I think about, like, I've taken pictures of things around my house or out in the wild and done an image search on Amazon, and then had the product show up that way. Or I've entered in part numbers on, and maybe all I have is a part number, and you can search on Amazon and find it that way. So they've really spent a lot of time and money, I'm sure, on easier to do the thing you need.
And that's what we're leading into: make model, year search, VIN number search, OEM part number, competitor part number, interchanges, and ultimately, and it's funny you brought that up, Damon. Ultimately, we would like to have a way to take a picture of a part and have AI help identify it.
And then I can even imagine, like, linking that to YouTube videos that show how to install or remove this thing, or how to search the part.
Yeah.
Reminders that tell you when to replace the part through an automated email based on the wear rates. And so there's a lot of potential there for sure. All right, what would be your best advice to help someone trying to sell a lean manufacturing approach and Kaizen activities to an old school senior leadership team who does not really believe in this? I don't think you've ever encountered that situation.
Well, Damon, through Lean Focus, you've probably encountered this quite a bit. I'll go back to, so what in a leadership team, it was a leader. So when I went to Colfax, I worked for indirectly dual reporting the CEO of Colfax and then the co-CEO of the division I was in. So there I had one guy, Steve Sims, that name might resonate with many of you, and then the other fella, I'm not going to name him, and the other fella, told me flat out on day one, I don't believe in any of this stuff, none of it. He used choice words I'm not going to repeat here. He did not believe in any of it, didn't want to hear about any of it, and just wanted results, and that was my job. And then on the other hand, I had Steve, who everybody that knows Steve was 100% playbook, no deviation, no matter what. So I had to quickly figure out that how I had to satisfy both of them, and but at the same time, I knew that to deliver results, I had to, not to use a pun, but I had to lean into the lean tools, the things that I've been trained to do to deliver results. And so that's what I did. And so my advice, if you can do this, and I don't know if it's possible in that situation, very similarly to my Dorman situation, don't try to change the enterprise, change what you can change. So use the tools to deliver results in your area, show that you're getting results, and then when the question comes up, how, if they're amenable to the conversations, let me show you how. Let me show you the process we use. Let me show you how we now have associates that are more self-directed because they're able to leverage the tools to solve their problems, or you name it. So that would be my advice. Lean into what you know, and control what you control to deliver results.
Yeah, deliver results. People run towards things that work. I mean, I see it all the time. People want to benchmark best practices. It's because things are working over there and they want to see why. So make that internal, like the results internal, so that people want to see why it's working. So I think it's excellent advice.
Yep.
On that safety theme, safety improvements sometimes require short-term expenditures. Lean leaders must understand that short-term expenditures are an investment in long-term profit improvements. How do you measure the behavior transformation of lean leaders and verify the required behavior transformation? So let's take an example like problem solving, where people jump to the solution, the conclusion too much in your business. Like, how do you install the new behavior, and then how do you inspect what you expect out of people?
Well, the first thing I tell you, and I appreciate the question or the comment around the ROI on safety, and I'll tell you what I tell all my people. I don't look at an ROI. If capital is needed, expense or capital is needed to make it a safer place, I'm going to sign it. I'm never going to say no, because you can't put a dollar value to or an ROI that's going to ever make sense other than it's the right thing to do. And I guess you could, if something catastrophic happened, but let's go ahead and not even talk about that. Let's just make the investment if we know that we need to do it. But on the other side of the coin, how do you make sure that you're getting results the right way? And I think that's, Damon, what you leaned into a moment ago, and it does involve inspecting what you expect. So as a leader, you have to go to Gemba. You can't do things telephonically or virtually. Even if the organization you work in or maybe you lead is spread out. I've led divisions spanning India, Europe, North America, China, Scandinavia, you name it. And so, yeah, you're going to be spending a lot of time on the road, but you have to go. You have to go and make sure that the folks that are leading the business under your span of control are delivering results the right way. But there could be a very near example of right beside you where folks, and Damon highlighted it, where hey, I know the answer. This is what we're going to do. Hey, why don't you? This is what I tell my team all the time. I say, why don't we slow down to go fast? And they, when I first started saying that, what are you talking about? I said, why don't we stop? And why don't we think about what's happening? Why don't we spend the time to really understand what the root cause is, or really understand the contributing variables here, so that when we're trying to do a variation reduction, we're hitting the right areas. But let's slow down, let's stop, get it right, and then implement it and get the outcome that we're expecting. Because ultimately, if you don't slow down and you throw a solution out there, you think it is, you do it again, you do it again, you do it again, you're wasting time. Your customers may become dissatisfied and start buying from somebody else. You might end up, hurting somebody because you put in a solution on a safety issue that doesn't really solve the problem. So slow down to go fast. Make sure that your leaders have that kind of philosophy and are getting things right the first time.
Yeah, so true. This individual would like to hear one key challenge from you that you encountered while fostering the lean culture amongst your team, and what specific actions you took, and how difficult was it to sustain those?
Wow, that's a big one that could cover a whole host of the last 25 years or so. Maybe I could give you an anecdote that kind of early on, could have been a career ender for me, or it could have been, well, it actually turned out into a good thing. So the question had to do with, building a lean enterprise and getting the leadership team to buy in. And so early on, I would say probably 3 or 4 years into my Danaher career, I was asked to start a facility in a low-cost region. I think I mentioned that a moment ago. And at some point, a year along into that journey, our CEO at the time, Larry Culp, made a trip to China, and specifically to the low-cost region, I should say, where we were. Cat's out of the bag now, but that's not important. The story came to the town, city we were in, and there was another operating company that had a location. By the luck of the draw, we visited the first operating company first, the other operating company first, I should say. Not a good visit. Gemba boards, daily management, not filled out correctly, dates from, a week old, things like that, and very, very poor visit. So on the car ride over, it's about half an hour over. I was in the front seat, he was in the back seat, and my boss, the group executive, was behind me. He asked me, he said, "John, am I going to see fake DBS in your facility?" And I, half a second, said, "Well, Larry, no, you're not going to see any DBS." And his response was, "Well, that's good. I'd rather see nothing than fake DBS." And I use that example to illustrate not the tremendous pressure that he, the question, anxiety I felt when he asked me that, but to illustrate that, back to the question that was asked, the team that I had built over there, we had just gotten the team together. We were just gelling as a leadership team. There were so many things going on, midnight calls, equipment, timelines, and suppliers, and building the team, and the labor team, and I didn't have time at that moment to try to force in DBS just for DBS sake. I knew that was not the right thing to do, and I would say that to you is find that right time. We talked about it earlier. When you encounter the leadership team that you get, whether you're given a team, or you're asked to move into a new role, or you choose to move into a new role, assess what you've got, assess what the business needs, and then if you encounter resistance, there's one method, which is, hey, we're going to do this. And I think in senior leadership roles, in some cases, you're a benevolent dictator. You set the tone and the direction, and that's what we're going to do. If you don't have that capability, if you work underneath a broader team, but you have a span of control, I would say, take care of your area. Do the things you can do in the area that you own. Control what you can control. Lean into the tools and the knowledge you have to deliver those results. And as Damon and I both said, those results will speak for themselves, and others will want to follow.
That's a great story. I'd never heard that one. I'd rather have not yes than yes.
Yep. And it was true. I mean, he really abhorred, fake DBS. And so, we ultimately, to long story short, we ultimately did, have the tools to deliver products to our customers on time and productively and safely. But at the time, we had nothing. So you got to build something from nothing sometimes. Sometimes you're given a situation where you have something and it's not right. You got to transform it. So it just, again, be situationally aware. Use your leadership skills to understand what you've been given, and then set your plan accordingly.
So John, I'll ask you just one parting question. So what one piece of bold advice might you give a CEO or a president or a leader that's listening to this today, or may listen to this in the future, that's hesitant to embrace change and more importantly, not taking the first step to drive their lean transformation? What piece of advice would you give that individual?
Yeah, not knowing where their hesitancy comes from, I would just say, oftentimes in my career, we don't have the time to do this right now. There's too many things going on, or we don't have the right team to do this, or we don't have the systems to have the information, or there are a lot of ways to justify not doing anything. And I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but if you're encountering any of those, I would just say, that piece I mentioned a moment ago, slow down to go fast. I think that works every single time. Just stop. You have an issue, just stop, leverage the tools to get going. And it can be, you might be overwhelmed by the tools and what people have said. Hey, you got to have policy deployment. Hey, you have to have all this stuff. I like college football. I was never a football player. I'm not a good athlete, but I love the game, and the analogies work for me. And that is, start with blocking and tackling. Just start small. You don't have to start with a playbook that the New England Patriots or the Philadelphia Eagles use, or the Kansas City Chiefs, whatever your team is. Start small. Use that playbook a high school team might play. You're going to get results. You're going to build better athletes, and those athletes are going to help you go to the college level, and then those athletes are going to help you go to the pro level, and ultimately you'll win the Super Bowl. But just get started. Start with something small. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Don't let something else take priority. Just to steal a slogan, just do it.
Great advice. John, thanks so much. It was a really fast hour. I want to thank you for taking time out and sharing all your wisdom and practical advice. So before we did, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the valuable lessons and insights that John has instilled in us today, and more importantly, how you can apply these in your own organizations later. If you have any further questions or would like to explore the possibilities of initiating, enhancing, or perhaps rebooting your own lead transformation, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our team's here to support you every step of the way. And once again, we thank John with heartfelt gratitude for sharing his experience and expertise with us, and are grateful for his contribution to this interview series. And I wish you all a great rest of your week. Take care, John. It's good to see you, man.
Good catching up with you. Thanks.